area with Dream Dogs, and I have a very special guest with me today, and a special topic today. Hello. So let me see if I can get text on the screen. No, they changed this up. I'm still learning how to do this. Let me see on here what it shows, because I have to pull it up on Facebook while we're going live here, and see, because I'd like to have your name up here, because I think that's always good. People know who we're talking to. No, It's not on there. So that's okay. That means I get to introduce you. So we have our special guest today, guys, and our special topic. Our special guest is Lauren Turner, and she is a fantastic dog trainer. We spent a long weekend together in North Carolina last month, and it was great because Lauren kept chiming in about dog foods and kibbles and what's best and what's, what the dog should be on. So I asked her if she would like to join me. She's a fellow Florida girl. So Lauren, what's your business and where are you at?
My business is Ideal Dog, and I am up the bend and around the corner of Florida over in Navarre. I always joke that we are lower Alabama. We're not really Florida, so we're over there, and we get a lot of cooler weather than you guys get. So I just want to point out, I was getting distracted because the chat seems to be working. I see it popping up on the side. So
yay!
That's good. Hi, friends.
Fingers crossed it stays that way. Hey, guys. So Lauren and we've chatted a bit. She was supposed to be on a couple weeks ago and she got sick, so she wasn't able to come on without a whole bunch of hacking and coughing, and we didn't think that'd be fun for anybody, let alone her. Wanted her bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for talking to us about supercharging your kibble. So Lauren, how did you get into kibbles and food and diet?
I've owned a few dogs in my adult lifetime, and my last dog was a pit bull mix. And if anybody with a pit bull knows, they're notorious for having sensitive stomachs and skin issues and ear issues. And as I sort of leapt from dog owner to dog trainer into that world, that just became a really big piece in sort of jump-starting a dog's training and pushing them into that rehab mindset, as I really just saw nutrition being that key piece that brought the dogs from like, hey, you're doing good in training, good job, to wow, do you really see this dog, see how they're changing and see how they're really making that 180-degree turn that people want to see from their dogs most times. And then truly, to be honest, I have a ton of health problems myself as far as autoimmune stuff, and that ties into the coughing. So I want to apologize to people if I do start hacking and coughing. It is actually not left over from the sickness. I just have a chronic cough that never goes away, and it's impacted my life in many ways. But surprisingly, I have learned so much about my health as I research about dog health. So I've gotten a lot of tips and tricks and hacks for myself as well. And truly, the line between human and dog as far as nutrition goes, 98% of the rules apply across the board. So, it can help everybody. This isn't just supercharging kibble, it's getting healthier in general. So, yeah.
Supercharging human kibble.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
So, yeah, right. That's super. Like that, you had the health issues, and I know you. If you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to. But you have like a very strict diet that you follow in order to feel the best that you can. Yeah. Can you tell us what you as a person eats?
Yes. So, truly, sometimes I feel like as I talk about myself, I feel like I'm talking about a client's dog, but I have a lot of skin issues. I have a chronic cough due to inflammation of the upper respiratory system. So my nose is chronically inflamed, which causes my body to want to cough. And for many, many years, doctors kept focusing on my lungs. And they're like, what's wrong with your lungs? And steroids and upon steroids. And then I also do sometimes have a flare of asthma as a result of, and here it comes, but it all stems from allergies. I'm allergic to everything environmental, indoor, outdoor. I am truly allergic to dogs. And so a lot of doctors would turn me away and they'd say, I'm sorry, we can't help you. You're allergic to dogs and yet you want to stay in the dog world. And I said, well, that's not going away. And I'm allergic to 90,000 other things. So why are you not helping me because of this one? So anyway, a lot of frustration overall. But one of the main things that I have found helped is I paid out of pocket because insurance doesn't want to pay for preventative or proactive laboratory testing, but I got a food sensitivity test done, and the results were mind-blowing. Because with food sensitivities, and this is true for dogs as well, so everything I'm about to say applies to me, but also to canines. Food sensitivities aren't something that you can pinpoint or see right away, like you would for traditional allergies. And so there is technically a difference between an allergy and a sensitivity. An allergy is what people who have a insect bite allergy or peanut allergy or a shellfish allergy, they eat something and within 30 seconds, they're blowing up in hives and their eyes swell and their throat starts swelling. And that's the danger, is you lose the ability to breathe. But with sensitivities, sometimes the impact to your body isn't seen until 3 days later. And so that's really hard for the average person to think back and say, well, 72 hours ago, I had some bread. And so maybe that was it, because we eat all of that stuff all the time. So anyway, I got some food testing done, and it showed that I was allergic to gluten, wheat, dairy, eggs, and pineapple. So, the major stuff that's, as I find out after getting the testing done, that stuff isn't everything, absolutely everything. And thankfully for people with celiac disease, there's a ton of gluten-free stuff coming out, which is really, really nice. However, gluten-free does not mean wheat-free. And so that, it's not quite as helpful for me. But going through that process myself was very interesting, because then I was able to take that information that I gleaned and, tie it into the dog world and try to truly explain to people, the difference between allergies and sensitivities, and how might those food sensitivities be impacting your dog, and why won't those necessarily show up on the allergy test that you can get done at the vet. And it's just because it's a different part of the immune system. So, so long answer to your question. But yeah, so my diet really consists of quality meats. So, I wish you lived closer, because your cows are really appealing to me.
Well, they come, they'll be frozen solid as a brick. Our guy is the butcher's about an hour away from us. Mm-hmm. So we get it home, and he has the whole, last time we did it, we had the SUV. So it was the whole back of the SUV was just full of bags and bags and bags of frozen like a brick. So I'm sure it can get to your place even without a giant cooler. I would just get some ice bags and throw them there and keep the AC cranked.
Because that's not weird, driving down the interstate with a whole trunk full of cow. That's normal. Yeah, totally normal.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, meat and veggies, that's my diet. And it's changed a lot of things, it sort of changes your social life a little bit, but it has helped. It has helped. The cough is still there, so I apologize in advance for the coughing episodes, but
I apologize for the squeaking Django got a toy.
We're equal. We're equal.
Right? So tell me, you were saying, your nice carnivore diet. Now we had discussed this a little bit earlier, so I get to share it with everybody. When I went to college, I majored in anthropology, and I minored in criminal justice. And people would ask, well, what do you want to do? Well, those were the only two things that really interested me enough to major and minor in them. So I'd look at them, I'd smile, and I'd tell them Indiana Jones. Yes. But one of the neat things with the anthropology background that we did is we'd look at different skeletons, different animals and people and everything else, and look at their teeth. And their teeth tells you the diet that they were on. So And I do it with the critters that I have here, because we have goats and we have the cows and we have the chickens. The goats and the cows have molars, and that's like all they have are molars. They don't have the rippy teeth. They have the grindy teeth, and they have the grindy teeth because their diet is vegetables.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. So when I talk to my clients about nutrition, and it's a huge piece of the way that I train, is I tell people, we're not going to Band-Aid fix behaviors with me. If your dog jumps, great, we'll fix the jumping. But I always joke with people, I don't know how to directly fix jumping itself, because the way I fix jumping is by going all the way back and fixing the relationship you have with your dog, the structure you have with your dog in the house, and the diet that the dog is on. Because the way that I train, if we fix that foundation, all of a sudden, all of these little nasty symptomatic behaviors disappear. So one of those cornerstones for me is nutrition. And one of the very first things I talk about with people is I want to get rid of all the guilt people feel regarding nutrition. And we touched on this a little bit right before you put this live, is people feel a lot of guilt when their dog gets some sort of disease or allergies or just this chronic problem or an early lifespan, something that they didn't expect to happen with their dog. And there's a ton of guilt about, well, what if I could have fed this or this or this or this, and, vaccinated for this and all this stuff. And I tell people, you can't feel that way because you didn't know. And it's not your fault you don't know, because if you even try to find this stuff out and you go on Google, poor you for trying to do good, because there's too much out there. There's way too much, and everybody has a different opinion. And so throughout the years, I've tried to just gather tidbits all over, sympathetic coughing. I just try to gather information, and I say, okay, let's go back to the start. And the very start is dogs are carnivores. Technically, they are called facultative carnivores, which means they are within a carnivore. Biologically, they're listed as a carnivore. However, they have the capacity to digest plant material, and they derive benefit from that plant material. There are some people who argue there is no real difference between a facultative carnivore and an omnivore, and I say, sure, you can have that argument. For the principle's sake, I think calling something that is categorized as a carnivore and then skewing them that definition and saying they're omnivore, I just don't like it. So for me, dogs are carnivores, and mechanically, there are a lot of reasons that we can look at a dog and know they're a carnivore. And you mentioned one, which is the teeth, the pointy teeth, and everything about their teeth structure is made for ripping and shredding and tearing and cutting. And there's no way around that. You would have to be silly to look at your goats and look at a dog and say that they were built to eat the same thing. That's just silly. So there are a few other things that I like pointing out. The pH of a dog's stomach is very acidic. And the reason for that is because that acidity allows a dog to digest quickly and efficiently meat and bone material. And they have a very short GI tract compared to a true omnivore or anything that eats a lot of plant material. A dog's GI tract is a lot shorter, and that's just to facilitate moving that raw meat matter through their body, extracting nutrients, and then excreting the remains before any potential pathogenic material can actually get stopped in the body and cause problems. So it's the salmonella and the E. coli that people get worried about when they hear raw meat. That gets pushed through the system, no problem. It's built to get rid of it. It's built to deal with that. And then a big difference between a creature who regularly digests a ton of plant material versus a creature who doesn't is the enzymes they have in their saliva. And we have salivary amylase, and that is an enzyme that upon contact with a carbohydrate, so think vegetables, think bread, anything that can be easily broken down into glucose by touching that enzyme. That's the purpose of that enzyme, is it immediately starts to break down that material so the body can then turn it into glucose. Dogs do not have amylase in their saliva. And so it takes a long time before that matter actually gets broken down into glucose. Not until they hit the pancreas, really, is there any amylase in their system at all. So a few quick differences that sort of tell us mechanically and biologically the dog is built to handle meat material more than it's built to handle plant material. And I try to give people sort of a general telescopic look at nutrition and what to feed your dog. And my general rule, and this applies to humans too, is the fresher the diet, the healthier it is. Like, it would be very difficult to argue that point. And so that helps me teach clients how to, right off the bat, which type of food is better. When we talk about types of food, people are actually surprised that there are options other than kibble and canned, and there are. And so when you look at all of these things, big picture, the way you tell what is better is what is fresher, what is processed the least, and that'll give you a good direction to go in. So other forms of food that you can feed your diet or feed your dog other than kibble, you can feed a dehydrated diet, and you can feed a freeze-dried diet, and both of those provide you with something that is easy to store, it's easy to serve, it's usually just a scoop of the base material, you add water and you serve, it's a complete meal. But it's only dehydrated or freeze-dried, which means that it's processed once and little to no heat is added in making that type of food. And then there's a lot of combinations of some sort of base mix that you add other things to. We talked about Volhard Dog Nutrition, and that's the way that they sell their food, is it's a complete base that you scoop and serve, add water, and then you add a ground protein on top of that. There's a lot of different options there. And then you have commercial raw diets. I mean, these things come in all shapes and sizes. Answers Pet Food itself sells long tubes of food. They're usually called chubs, like chubs of meat and vegetables and all sorts of stuff in this shape, and you piece it up. And they also sell stuff in cartons. They sell patties and nuggets and all sorts of stuff to find the perfect combination of fresh and convenience is what they're trying to do. So lots of other options out there, and you just have to sort of look at things and say, well, what is the price? What is the convenience factor? And how fresh is it? And those are sort of all of the different factors you have to try and balance and find the point at which you want to feed, how convenient is it? Because the more convenient it is and the fresher it is, the more expensive it's going to be. And the more convenient it is, but maybe not quite as fresh, the price point will then get pushed down. And so everybody's going to have a different point at which they're willing to sacrifice or not sacrifice, and that helps determine what category they're going to be in. So I see a question on there. I don't know if you want to address that.
So she reposted. She said, "Are your taste buds affected by your diet that you were talking about?" She says right now she can only eat certain things.
So in a positive way, I think they're affected. I used to hate kale, and now kale's like a regular part of my diet. I thought it was disgusting. The texture was like cardboard. I didn't like it. So we kind of joke about that a little bit. My husband and I both have sort of revolutionized our diet, and I thank him every day for being willing to do it with me. But after eating so many of our homemade salads and vegetables and stuff like that, we went to Panera, and I got a salad that I always got from Panera. It was it's their summer one. It has a lot of fruit in it. It had like pineapples and blueberries and strawberries. Anyway, I ate that, and I was like taken aback at how sweet it was, because I didn't ever remember it being that way. So I don't think like mechanically like my taste buds were changed, but it's just the decrease in the amount of sugar we ate day to day changed the way that we remembered food, I guess. So that was interesting.
Yeah, and people put sugar in everything. Like, I love watching Gordon Ramsay cooking shows, and he's always like, "Yeah, add some sugar to it because it's one of it." So I'm like, well, there's a difference too between adding like a pinch of sugar to something, to adding like a cup of sugar to something. So there's that.
My gosh.
And when we look at dog treats, this was years ago. We were still living in Gainesville, and we had gone over to Pet Supermarket to find some treats, just, to find some different treats, get out of the house some. And as I'm looking at all the ingredients, every single one of them had sugar in it. Unless it was like just like the freeze-dried liver stuff. But like everything had sugar. And I'm like, why are we putting sugar in dog treats? Sugar.
Yes. You cannot escape it. And I think it is truly one of the biggest underrated conspiracies of our day. One of the main rules of the way that I eat now is you don't want sugar in your diet.
Yeah.
I challenge you to go to a grocery store and find meat that doesn't have sugar in it. I challenge you to go to the store, and I bet you could fit the products that don't have any sugar added into one basket. Like, I guarantee you, it doesn't exist unless you go to Whole Foods. Publix has a pretty good selection, but very limited brands. You would not believe. People tell me all the time that they started a ketogenic diet for, such and such reasons and whatnot. And they tell me, I'm like, oh, what are you eating for breakfast? Oh, well, bacon and avocados. And I'm like, oh, where are you getting your bacon from? Oh, just from Walmart. And I'm like, okay, if you don't know, a ketogenic diet, the whole purpose is to decrease your carbohydrates and sugars to the point where your body is fueling itself off of ketones, which is from breaking down fats. Whereas a normal diet, everything is broken down into glucose, so anyway, the whole purpose is to basically not have sugars and glucose in your diet. And yet they're living off of bacon from a traditional grocery store, and it's full of sugar. I mean, you literally have to become an investigator. You flip anything over, there's sugar added. And after I realized that about myself, I started becoming even more particular about dog food, because you are so right. It's in treats. It is in, I about lost my mind. I will not throw any brand under the bus because I get really passionate and heated about this stuff. But a dog came to me on a prescription formula, canned prescription formula that was costing these people an arm and a leg. And out of curiosity, I looked at the ingredients, and I wish that I could take away that minute of my life, because it's caused me so much angst. So this dog had serious GI problems for multiple different reasons, but it was on a prescription diet. And I looked at the ingredients, and probably the fourth ingredient, I kid you not, was cane sugar. Just sugar. And I reached out to that company, and I said, can you please tell me the purpose behind this? And they essentially said it was for palatability and for the texture of the formula. So there was no nutritional, according to the company itself, there's no nutritional requirement for the sugar. It was for texture and palatability, which is a nice way of saying it tastes good to the dogs. And so through my own personal search, I just have become very disappointed in a lot of companies that push out dog food just because of that stuff. Yes, sugar feeds cancer. I saw that. That's right. If you want to shorten the story, like there's no way around it. Like it absolutely does. A cancer cell itself has so many times more glucose receptors than a normal healthy cell, and so that's why research is looking into and is starting to show that if you eat a ketogenic diet, when you have cancer, you can starve those cells because they fuel off glucose. And so if you don't feed the rest of your good cells with glucose, you can essentially, the theory is you can starve those cells. So very, very good point. Ruth said that. So I want to talk about kibble overall real quick, big picture. So we talked about, well, how do you tell a good type of food from a not so good type of food and sort of balance that convenience. Kibble itself is cooked multiple different times in multiple different stages. And in general, I'm talking big general principles here, it's cooked at high temperatures for long periods of time because we've got all these different ingredients in the kibble and we've got to smush it together into one nice convenient brown ball, and so that takes a lot of processing and pushing through the extruder machine and high heat and all that stuff. So in general, we have to weigh the pros and cons of feeding kibble. It is affordable and it is extremely convenient, and that's why it makes it so common in the average dog household. Like there's no way around that. But we will sacrifice quality and freshness with kibble. And it's super dry. We'll talk about that a little bit when we talk about how to supercharge it, but it's a very dry product. It's a very processed product. And so we have to consider how can we fix these negatives, because by and large, even the clients who I teach this to, they're going to still feed their dog kibble because of the price point and the convenience, and that's the life we live in. And so that's where I started. Instead of sort of preaching about the benefits of feeding anything other than kibble, I started saying, well, how can I make this better for the everyday household? Because there are things that we can fix. So real quick, there's no way around it at this point in time to talk about kibble without touching on the DCM issue. So DCM is a huge hot topic right now. You go to any dog forum on social media right now, and somebody's going to be asking some question somehow related to DCM. So if you've been living under a rock and you have no idea what I'm talking about, essentially there's a huge study going on with the FDA on why are there higher numbers of dogs recently being diagnosed with a heart condition that they are genetically not predisposed to getting. So these dogs...
Let me pause right here. You called it DCM.
Mm-hmm.
What is it?
DCM is, I apologize for butchering it for anybody who's smarter than I am, dilated cardiomyopathy, I believe is what it is. And it's essentially a condition where the valves in the heart of a dog are enlarged, and so the heart does not function properly. So there are certain breeds of dogs who are genetically predisposed to get this, and this hits close to home because I do, and I know you do. We've got golden retrievers, and golden retrievers are one of the breeds who are predisposed to getting DCM. And so this isn't like a brand new condition. What's new and interesting about it is dogs who are not predisposed to getting this condition are presenting with DCM. And so what started happening is people started questioning, well, where is this coming from? The big why is it happening? And as the FDA started looking into things, the FDA stepped in and started looking at things, and they said, well, it could potentially be due to food. There's a lot of pretty eye charts out there sort of showing what brands are being implicated. For me, the big thing about DCM is we don't know. So at the end of the day, I try to look at a problem and I say, okay, like this might be it. This could be the why. But is there something we can do to avoid the problem altogether? And fortunately, there is. So what's going on with DCM? I think the stuff I've been reading most recently, they're saying DCM is primarily caused by the dog not producing enough taurine. So taurine is an amino acid that dogs It is non-essential. What that means is a dog does have the internal capacity to produce taurine on its own. So if they're eating a good diet, the body is perfectly fine. They can create taurine. The body uses taurine as a building block. Amino acids are building blocks, then the dog will be perfectly fine. The problem is, for whatever reason, the dog didn't have enough taurine in their diet. And so that's where the terminology comes from. Sometimes people will say DCM. Sometimes they'll say the taurine-induced DCM, I think is how they're wording it. It's, yeah, so anyway, because there's that sort of is differentiating between did they have this genetically or are they getting this because of diet? Diet-induced DCM, maybe that's what they're calling it. I don't know. There's too many headlines for me to keep track of. Anyway, the basic idea is there are 10 amino acids dogs must eat from the diet. And then through, excuse me, once they have those amino acids in their body, they're able to use 2 of those, which is cysteine and myothine. Again, I apologize to any actual nutritionist for butchering all of these terms. But they can use these 2 things to produce taurine and everything is happy and good to go. No DCM. So then what is being implicated are grain-free diets are potentially causing this issue. But the headlines are a bit misleading because it has nothing to do with if there's grains or no grains in the dog food. It has everything to do with, they think, how many legumes are in the diet. And something about the way these legumes are being processed by the dog is preventing the dog from creating their own taurine. And that's what's causing the thing. So what you'll see in a lot of dog foods these days, if you flip the bag over like I do, you'll see taurine just added in the diet. Now, this is not uncommon for cat food. Cats need taurine to survive. Taurine is an essential amino acid for cats, so they must eat it to get it in their bodies. But it's not for dogs. But just to sort of CYA for the dog kibble companies, they're just adding taurine until they can sort of figure out
but if it's being blocked by the legumes, it doesn't matter how much. I mean, maybe a little bit can trickle through.
Right.
But you so really look at your ingredients. You have to know, and that's one of the things.
Yeah. Yeah, so then some people will counter that by saying, and I have no stance on the issue. Again, I just sort of read everything. But some people say, well, what's being blocked is the dog's ability to produce taurine on their own, but they can uptake it fine. And so that's why the kibble companies are adding it. My personal opinion is I think they're just adding it to make people feel better, but we actually have no idea if that's helping or not. So that's that. That's my DCM spiel, is people don't need to worry about whether their food has grains or not grains at this point in time. What they need to understand is the grain-free foods, in order to remain complete and balanced, according to National Research Council, which is NRC, and AFCO, which I have no idea what that stands for at this point in time, but they are the organization that creates nutrition guidelines for dogs. And so you'll see on bags of food, meats and exceeds AFCO and NRC nutritional requirements, something like that. There's sort of the regulating agency, although they don't actually have regulating power. Anyway, I have no idea. Oh, right. In order for grain-free foods to meet those nutritional requirements and to not have grain in the food, what they tend to do is fill the gap by adding legumes. Like, they have a good nutritional profile in order to give the dogs protein and all the extra stuff that the grains may have given the other food. So that's why, in my opinion, the grain-free diets are the ones being implicated, is just because they have a tendency to have a lot of legumes. But this circles back around to, how can we avoid this problem altogether? And the answer is, feed a food that is biologically appropriate for a dog. A dog doesn't need grains, grain-free, or legumes, period. And so if we're arguing about what grain or grain-free or legume-free or whatever food to feed the dog, we have to ask, well, let's just go back to the beginning and feed them what they should be eating in the first place. You know, there will always be some sort of disease or problem when you feed something an inappropriate diet. So that's my DCM spiel is let's not focus on grain-free, because some of the recommendations I have for kibble, some are grain-free, some are grain-inclusive, and it doesn't matter to me. I don't care. I look at the ingredients. And what you want to see is you want to see meat. Like, that's what you want to see. You want to see meat. You don't want to see corn, and we'll talk about that in a second. But focus on good quality sources of protein in the kibble, and we will circumvent that problem altogether and rotate kibbles frequently. Every kibble has a different nutritional profile, and some are deficient in some things, some are bountiful in others, and so you want to rotate to get like a nice nutritional profile and keep that gut microbiome nice and fruitful and have lots of strains of bacteria in there. And you only get that by feeding a variety of foods. So all of that, I realized that was like a really long introduction, but the meat of this supercharging kibble is I know what is most interesting to people, because people will feed kibble. There's no way around that, because of the price point and because of the convenience. So in a relatively non-scientific matter, I have come up with my favorite kibbles. They essentially, my requirements are, I want to see a lot of meat. I want to know that the meat is, the company is at least trying to get good sources of meat. Okay, they're not just feeding 4D meats. And 4D stands for dying, diseased,
make up to decrepit.
To dumb and disgraceful meat.
There you go.
That's not technically it, but the idea is it's just this really cruddy leftover meat from animals that are not fit for human consumption. So I want to know that the company is trying to source well. I don't want to see, if I see legumes in the formula, I don't want it to be top 4 at least. And I don't want to see derivatives of those again. So for example, if the food says chicken, lamb, peas, I'll be like, oh, a little bit of a cringe, because again, the legumes are sort of a cheap plant-based protein. But I'll sort of let it slide if it's a whole pea, and there's no other forms of pea, like pea protein, pea flour, pea starch. That's a trick that a lot of companies are using, is you have peas like 5 different times listed in the label, and that's a no-go. We don't want that. So good meat sources, relatively good sourcing. I do like seeing there's non-GMO products in there, because that usually will eliminate corn. I don't like corn. I think corn is cheap and it's ruining dogs. It's highly inflammatory for almost every single dog. You can't show me a dog and say corn is really good for this dog. I'll be like, okay, sure. And I just like seeing not a lot of what we call fillers. And fillers are things that you could argue, the kibble company will argue that it has value. But really it's just sort of empty calories and sort of making the dog feel happy. And so potatoes are a big one. All different sorts of legumes are a big one. Trying to think, like lentils. I don't know. Can you think of any like common, people who say fillers
beet
all
pulp.
the time? Beet pulp. Beet pulp is actually a sneaky way to add sugar into the food also, because it's sweet. That's what they're doing. But it's, I mean, I'd like to see that more than the prescription formula that had sugar just dumped in there. Like, at least they're trying. So my old-time favorite kibble for the past 3 years, and I mean, I'm very strict. I'm constantly changing this list, and it's shortened considerably. So my list is very, very short, but my #1 favorite kibble right now is Farmina. Farmina needs to start paying me, because I recommend it to every single person, and I feel like Like our local stores are selling out of Farmina, especially since the DCM thing. I feel like you can't buy this on the internet anymore because they're always out of stock. But Farmina is by far my favorite because they always, even pre this DCM issue, have never substituted real meat for legumes and cheap plant-based protein. They haven't done that, so I appreciate that. But really, really high quality or high amounts of quality meats are in there. They say right on the bag, 70% of this kibble is from animal sources, and I appreciate that. They up their protein content a little bit because they use egg products instead of legumes. And the price point is not horrid at all. I think a 23-pound bag runs $65 or so, which depending on what people are feeding could be a little bit of a sticker shock, but you will not find quality food for less than $55 a bag. Like, it just doesn't exist. And then where they sort of get you is, well, how big is their big bag? But for me, that price point is, I think they could charge considerably more for the quality of the ingredients they have in there. So they have a line called Ancestral Grains, and that is my favorite because you look at that and you look at the ingredient list, and it's quality stuff from start to finish. You can read everything on there and you understand what it is until you get to all the bacterias, but just know that it's probiotics. Nobody can say those anyway. And they also have a grain-free line. So if your dog truly has a gluten allergy, the Farmina grain-free line is nice. And somehow they've come up with a formula that doesn't require a bunch of legumes. So I appreciate that. The next brand I really like is called Open Farm. But there's a different reason why I like Open Farm. So they actually do have peas like listed in the top 5, but they don't have derivatives of the peas. And there is a list out there that I truly appreciate. It's called The List, and they update it every year. And it's on a website called The Truth About Pet Food. I think it's .org, but just search it. They're a nonprofit organization who really looks into sourcing and processing protocols and cleanliness protocols and transparency. Open Farm, right now on the 2019 list, is the only kibble listed on there. And so that list in itself is, I want to say, 15 to 20 different companies, and they're all listed there because they have passed the organization's sort of threshold for, are you transparent? Are you sourcing properly? Is this real food, organic, non-GMO? What type of food and what type of meats are you using? Is it feed grade or is it human grade food? So a lot of foods on that list are raw or freeze dried or something like that. This is the only brand of kibble that made the cut. And so for that reason, I have it on here simply because of the quality of their ingredients, even though it does have some legumes. So it's sort of breaking some of my rules, but I like it for more reasons. And it's available online, which a lot of people like. You can subscribe and do all that stuff. So that's a really good option for a lot of people. And the price point is nice. It's more expensive than the Farmina, but everybody has a different price point. And then the last company I really like is called Carnivory. Carnivory bakes their kibble instead of pushing it through an extruder machine. And so what that means is it's cooked at a lower temperature because it doesn't have to be pushed through this massive kibble forming machine. It has, I think, like 10 ingredients, and that's it. Like, I look at that stuff and I'm like, oh, I should put that in my hurricane prep Tupperware so that, like, worst comes to worst, like, we could eat this stuff and be fine. It's super, super good ingredients. The killer is it's only available in very, very fancy pet stores. Excuse me. It's available on whitedogbone.com. The price point, I guess I'm like leaving people hanging here. The price point is really, really high. It's like $6.50 per pound compared to Farmino, which is like $2.50 per pound. And so I sort of joke to people, like, if you can afford carnivore, you might consider raw feeding, like, because the price point is actually higher for carnivore than these other things. But again, we have extremely high quality, extreme convenience, and so we have the extreme cost to match. So those are the kibbles I like. I am open and willing to listen to arguments for other kibbles, but I qualify that with the fact that I read a lot of kibbles. Like, for the most part, if somebody's like, hey, what do you think about these ingredients? I'll be like, oh, is that, such and such's formula? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, I know. I recognize the order of those ingredients. So my big rule, I have some rules for people when they do feed kibble. And if a dog is coming to me, sorry, go ahead.
I'm going to pick up your kibble recommendation sheet.
Oh, look at that. Fancy. So for any client who's bringing their dog to me for a board and train, it is mandatory that they switch to a diet that I approve. And so if they want to remain on kibble, then they must make these changes that I'm about to talk about, and that's there on my handout over there. So the number one rule that I have is you have to rotate. I think Victoria left. Did you just leave?
I tried to get that into the comments to share it, and It just kicked me off of everything.
Freaked out. Okay.
So you were saying that for clients who come in.
Yes. For clients who come to me for a board and train, it is mandatory that they switch to a diet I approve. And if they want to stay with kibble, that's fine. They have to choose one of these kibbles and follow all these rules that I'm about to walk people through. So the first rule is rotate bags of kibble frequently. I, by and large, think that if you introduce variety to your dog's diet, you're going to avoid a host of problems that they could have if you feed the same bag of kibble year after year after year. And I realize that goes against some recommendations that are out there. And I guess
if the breeder used it whenever he was a puppy, I don't need to keep on it for his whole life.
Exactly. Yes. You now own the puppy. Therefore, you get to choose what the dog eats, unless it's in a contract that you've signed. And then I have no recommendations for you because that's on you. So rotate types of kibble frequently. I usually recommend when the bag of kibble gets low, order another one, dump it together, and then that's how you can transition your dog to the new one without major problems. After switching your dog to like 3 different bags of food, you'll find the transition process happens a lot quicker. You don't have to spend 10 days transitioning them. You can spend 7, then you can spend 4, and then you can swap that dog to a totally different diet every single day, because what you're doing is you're introducing a lot of really good gut bacteria to the dog's body in their gut. And the bacteria is like, oh yeah, I recognize the chicken. Let me activate these bacteria, handle this chicken. And then you introduce venison and they're like, oh yeah, venison, go. But if your dog's only ever eaten chicken, it's kind of a serious freak out moment when you introduce beef for the first time. So we can avoid all of that by just rotating bags of kibble. 3 main rules when you feed kibble. The number 1 rule is you add warm water and let it soak into the kibble before feeding. The main reasons for that, one is if you have one of those dogs who just gobbles all their kibble, they won't be able to do that anymore because now this stuff is sticking to the bowl and it's mushy and they have to lick it up and chew it and it's stuck, and so it just slows them down, and it's adding water is way cheaper than buying one of those puzzle bowls. So there you go. Saved money. Now you can put it towards the kibble budget. So let it soak. And then honestly, one of the big reasons is kibble is usually about 10% moisture. Just look on the back of the bag and it says it right there. Real fresh food is about 75% moisture. And so the dog's body is like, I don't know what to do with this food. I'm really stuck. And so just add water and you're basically rehydrating that diet. And it does so much for the dog.
It'd be like if you just ate a whole bunch of crackers, if you could eat gluten and wheat and stuff, but you just ate crackers, and you had no water to help wash it down with. That's not.
Yeah. What do people add to their cereal? Like, nobody wants to eat dry Fruit Loops. Like, add some milk to that, So that's what it would be like. It's more enjoyable, and it does help the digestion process. If your dog suffers from bloating and gas and stuff, that will help, and it's cheap. You just add warm water. The next thing is, I highly recommend, and for my board and trained clients, mandate they add digestive enzymes to the bowl. This is just a powder base that you, depending on the size of the dog, add between a teaspoon or less per meal, and it usually just sits in the fridge. I personally like Whole Hard Dog Nutrition's. It's been studied for many decades, and so we have a good, solid product that has science to back up its worthiness. You're adding a few pennies worth of material per bowl. It lasts most dogs at least a month. Comes in a jar, stick it in the fridge, scoop it on top of the meal, done. Now, what that enzyme is doing is helping break down all that material, because the majority of dogs' enzymes are in its pancreas, which, if you look at a flow chart of digestion, is like 50% of the way through the digestion process. And so if we introduce those enzymes right at the beginning, right when the food hits the mouth, has 50% more time to help break down the material and extract all those nutrients for the dog to eat. This is particularly important to add to a dog's food if they're considered a senior. And a senior, by definition, is usually around 6 or 7, depending on the size of the dog. Which for me, I was shocked when I walked in one day with my little dog, and they're like, well, littler, he's 45 pounds. And they were like, oh, he's senior. Do you want to get his senior blood panel? And I was like, Remington, he's still a youthful soul. He doesn't need any of that. No. But, senior 6 or 7. So really important. And the reason for that is a dog has a limited amount of enzymes. They don't produce more throughout its lifetime. So when they're gone, they're gone. And usually it's kind of on the struggle bus once we hit that age. And then the last thing I tell people to add is, this is only available on Whole Hard Dog Nutrition, their website, and it's called their Endurance Blend. If I posted a link to this product every single time I saw somebody discussing DCM and what should I feed my dog so it doesn't get DCM, I think I would be a millionaire. Because what this Endurance Blend is again, it's a powder base, and you just scoop, a certain amount depending on the size of your dog, but usually between a teaspoon and a tablespoon. And it's cold pressed amino acids, plus a few other really good things like dehydrated apple cider vinegar, a few other things. I think there's a little bit of chicken liver. There's some sort of liver just to make it yummy and palatable for the dog. Instead of adding sugar, they add, some liver, which is great. But this is adding cold pressed amino acids. And if we go back to the root of DCM, it comes with a dog not getting all the essential amino acids they need, possibly because the kibble has been overcooked and it's been killed. Essentially, it's not in there. But this has all 10 essential amino acids. And so long as the dog has the capacity still to produce taurine on its own, it has every available amino acid right there sitting on top of its kibble, in addition to whatever is in the kibble. So you have absolutely no concerns about your dog, having problems because they're not getting enough.
So you said that was the Endurance by Whole Hard?
That's the Endurance. Now, if I had to choose between these three things, like if I had a serious budget that I could not bust, the Endurance would be what I would add. And water is free, so use the water,
So the first and only time I heard Wendy Volhard was my first ISCP conference. It was the one up in Alexandria, Virginia. And I think that's the one it was. And she spoke at it, and she was talking about the Volhard diet. And it was the first time I had really got to hear about it. Because, you hear, but to hear it from her,
Right.
It was fantastic. So much so that while we're sitting there, like as soon as we were done, I ordered her book to ship to the house here, and I ordered it digitally so I could start reading it right away. And I never order books dual like that. Like it's one or the other. But it was so good. And I remember she was saying about how she came up with endurance is she was talking with some police officers, and they said that, you know, they have to feed this food to the police dogs, and, you know, they're shedding and they kind of smell, and like the back of the police car doesn't look the greatest. And they're like, can you do something? You know, we want help, but we can't switch to the Volhard diet. We can't switch. Right. We have to feed this food. So she came up with endurance, and it cut down on the shedding. It cut down like much smaller poops, you know, like everything was much better. And the dogs looked so much better, and they had so much more energy. They weren't, you know, dead at the end of the shift. Exactly.
Yeah. She, I remember hearing that same story. I went to a seminar up in Virginia. And this was it was called Let Dogs Be Dogs conference. And it was with Mark Goldberg and Brother Christopher from New Ski. And Wendy was just a guest appearance there. And she just had, I think they gave her 2 hours. And my gosh, like I was like, please stay. Like I need to learn more. And that was the first time I learned about Wendy Volhard in general. I had her book. I had read her book. So that was, you know, the only information I had for her. The book is fantastic. If anybody's wanting to learn more about the basics of dog nutrition, and the book goes in so much more in depth, but it's called The Holistic Guide to a Healthy Dog, available on Amazon for under $20. So there. But yeah, so she developed this formula for that police organization. I don't know if it's sheriffs or whatever, but I also remember her saying the dogs are falling asleep. They were tired. Yeah. They didn't have enough energy, and the difference that they saw in the dogs afterwards was amazing. And that's what I see in the client dogs, you know, is I come back. So for private lessons, I just highly recommend that people change diets, but it's not mandatory. But I come back week to week to week, and the dogs truly, I promise you, this isn't like confirmation bias or anything. The dogs are shinier. The dogs are more alert. They're ready to learn. They are not shedding all over me, which again, allergies to dogs. So like this stuff matters to me. And shave your dog before we start. Yeah, please. Yeah, mandatory. But yeah, they truly are cleaner. They don't smell. And they're just a better version of themselves just by adding, truly, if you did the math, it'd be cents to the bowl per meal you feed your dog. So there are a few other digestive enzymes on the market that I like, so I don't hold people to that, but it's so easy. Go to volhardDogNutrition.com. All the products are there. They have treats on there. You can look into their food. And what is amazing about their company is they have a page called Ingredients or something like that. They put a reason for every single ingredient they have in any one of their products. They say, this is why we add it. Like, I challenge any other traditional kibble company to do that. Like, tell me why you're adding GMO corn to your food. Like, what's going on there? You know, whatever. Tell me about that beet pulp, you know, like we mentioned before. So that is how we take kibble that is very processed and dry, and we sort of spruce it up and supercharge it to be, now for me, it makes me confident that the dog is getting truly the baseline nutrients they need. Because just a quick note on kibble, those ingredients and that analysis that you see generally is pre-cooking. And so that to me is a transparency issue. And if you notice, if you look at the guaranteed analysis, I should qualify. I'm pretty sure the guaranteed analysis is post-cooking. And if it's not, I might lose my mind a little bit. But I want to be clear that I'm not quite confident. The ingredient list is pre-cooking. That's fact. The guaranteed analysis, the reason that that's fuzzy and a little bit hard for the average person to understand is because they have min values and max values. But they don't tell you what's actually in that bag that you're holding. You have no idea. But all you know is there's a maximum of 5% or a minimum of 5% crude protein, and what is the, it's kind of like, okay, that's cool to know, but what's actually in this bag? And so people are a little confused about that. But so if you add these things, you can be confident that your dog is getting the baseline nutrition that they need to survive day to day. Now, I use the word survive intentionally because the dog is still not going to thrive on a processed diet that we've sort of added these nutrients to. They truly won't thrive. I think the only way to get a dog on kibble into the category of thriving, like doing the best that they possibly could mechanically and biologically do, is by adding fresh food to that diet. And so at the bottom of that sheet that you had posted earlier,
and it is up on our Facebook, so you can go on there. I turned it into a JPEG, so because I can't share the PDFs as easily as the JPEGs. So you guys, like, go to the Dream Dog Central Florida Dog Training Facebook page and find it. It's up at the top.
Perfect, great. And if for whatever reason nobody can find that, or they can't get to it, or whatever, just ping me and I'll send it. I hand this page out like candy, so it's not a big deal. So when you add fresh food to the bowl, my general rule is you don't want it to comprise more than 20% of the total diet itself, because we don't want to skew nutritionally what the dog is getting day to day, because they do have daily nutritional requirements we have to meet. And studies have shown that feeding as little as 20% real fresh food can eliminate or prevent a lot of cancers and some of the markers for cancer. And so that's sort of where I've come up with that 20% rule. So for example, if your dog gets 1 cup of kibble per meal, what you want to do is take out 1/5 of that cup, and you can add 1/5 cup of a combination of whatever, this fresh food stuff. And so different things I recommend is cottage cheese, no preservatives. And I say there's 4% on the sheet because that's the fattiest cottage cheese you can find at your typical grocery store. I have no idea about the process of creating cottage cheese. Maybe that's just as fatty as you can get in cottage cheese, but dogs need fat, so we want the fatty stuff. We don't want skim, all of this stuff. So whole milk yogurt is a great additive. Goat's milk is great, which you should get some of that stuff fresh and just dump it in everybody's bowl, and you'd have some super dogs on your hands.
Right. Well, that's with Gypsy, fingers crossed for pregnancy here. We got the puppy culture, which we have to actually start going through. And it was saying about making like a slushy for her. And it's like, you need like so many liters or gallons of goat milk. And I'm like, well, I've got 3 who just had babies, and I could probably start milking them.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So quick tangent, but the guy who's owned the dog who's lived the longest, according to record, and I want to say the dog lived to be like 34 or something. Rodney Habib is a great person. Anybody who is interested in this type of stuff, fantastic guy to follow on social media. He comes up with the craziest Facebook lives and demonstrations. So like, you'll never be bored if you follow his page. But he personally went out and interviewed the guy who owns that dog, and he said, "What's your secret?" And he said, "This dog walks a ton per day." I want to say he's a dairy farmer. And so, he would get in his cart to go to the cows, and the dog runs all of these pastures. And I believe it was a Kelpie who lived in Australia. And so anyway, he would go drive out to milk the cows and whatnot, and the dog would get some of that fresh milk every single day. Fresh raw milk, like literally still warm. And he said that the exercise plus that raw milk was the key to that dog's.
So our cows are Jersey cows, and they're the brown ones, brown cows. What you think of when you think Wisconsin cows, because we used to live up in Wisconsin, and we know because we would drive around, the white with the black spots. That's not what this is. Those ones produce a lot of milk. My Jersey cows produce a lot of butter fat in it. So my Jersey cows produce the richest, creamiest milk, which is what I wanted.
Do you know, so I haven't done a lot of research, so I may sound like super ignorant, but there's like A2 cows and A1 cows. And Jersey cows tend to be the A2 cows. Is that common for all Jersey cows or?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is. Yeah. For most of them, you can get them tested, but it's kind of like, like I know it's like 99.9% likelihood they're going to test for A2 because they're purebred Jersey cows.
Okay. Gotcha.
So like I haven't tested mine, but when we got them, so we got the goats to milk, and we got them, and I'm like, they have little tiny, they're Nigerian dwarf goats, right? So they are the size of a smaller, like a big mini Aussie, a smaller normal Aussie. Like my border collie is like the size of these goats. They're small. Okay. So like you're trying to milk them and they got these little tiny teats. And it's you work and like your fingers hurt because you can only go like this. And you end up with like a half a cup of milk if you're lucky. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I'm like, okay, we'll keep the goats because they're cute and they're a nice distraction and they're adorable. But let's get some Jersey cows. And we're just like, okay. So we got the Jersey cows to milk, and the ones we got were a really good deal. We got a mom and her daughter, and then both of them had baby boys. So we got the family of 4 for like, I want to say $1,000 because they were skin and modes. The moms, they were on death's door. And so we got them and we fattened them up. Even one of our neighbors comes over and he's like, I was about to call, animal services on you because these cows were in such terrible shape, but look at them now. So like I have pictures of the cows when we first got them to now. Well, they didn't want to be milked. So that was hard to do. And so we ended up buying a milk machine from China through Amazon. So like it came in a shipping crate, which, not a box, a shipping crate. And we used it, and it was so much faster to get the milk out of them, except, it took forever to clean up. So like trying to milk them normally, like they'd kick. And so I'm like, fine. Then what we're doing is we had the board fencing, we still do. And we had them on harnesses, on head halters. So we attached it here, and then we tied her hips up. So if you try to kick me, like you can't kick like this. You can only kick backwards. So like, I'm going to sit right here and be good. And then they'll start to be like, fine, if you're going to do that, I'm going to flip my front foot up and I'm going to get dirt and poop in there. And then you can't use it. And that'll show you. And I'm like, come on. But it got to be just too much, but it was neat. Now here's part of it with the raw cow milk is if it would get where they would, get poo in it or get dirt in it, like we're not drinking it then, but I need to finish milking you out. My dogs would get it. My dogs would eat their own poo anyway. Like cow poo's a delicacy. And so they loved it when the cows would do that. Like Arrow, we had Arrow and Gypsy and stuff. And they're like, please, 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 please.
Oh, that's so cool.
Right. So they'd get some of the raw milk, but you're supposed to, if it wasn't, poo and dirt milk, if it was like good milk, which is nice with the milker because like it's right there. Like there's nothing else that's going to get in it from like inside. You're supposed to, boil it and then cool it real quick to kill off anything. And I'm like, yeah, we didn't do that. So like we didn't sell it or anything. We drink it, and I turn it into, let's see, I did mozzarella, I did ricotta, I did yogurt. Oh my God, yogurt was so good. I actually made my own butter. And because of the high content of butter fat in it, one was just, because you'd put it in the fridge, right? And you'd see the cream separate.
Right.
One didn't have so much cream. So whenever I made that into butter, I ended up with a loaf pan full of butter. Loaf pan full of butter.
Oh my gosh.
I never did cottage cheese, but homemade sour cream, oh my goodness, is it good.
You're killing me.
So we did that. We have the egg chickens.
Yeah.
But we don't do anything with the goats. They're just pets.
They're cute. I love seeing them on Facebook. So please keep them so I can see them. So talking about the dairy and where it comes from and the difference between the grocery store's pasteurized version and pasteurized and homogenized version versus straight from the animal. One of my favorite things to add to dog food is kefir. And kefir is, or kefir, it depends who you talk to, how you say it. Nobody get mad at me. I say kefir. But kefir is a fermented milk product. So you take this form of dairy, whatever it is you want to turn into kefir. You can have goat's milk kefir, calf kefir, whatever. And you ferment it. And so this original form already has lots of good bacteria and probiotics. That's why people like yogurt. Yogurt is, has extra strains. And then you ferment this, and the fermentation process is literally growing bacteria. So now you have this supercharged dairy product. So if you go to the grocery store and you buy kefir off the shelf, this is a fermented product from a pasteurized, homogenized milk product. So it's already killed off bacteria. And I think it's sort of funny. It's like they killed the bacteria and then they added some more bacteria by fermenting it. So Answers Pet Food is a company, a commercial pet food company, and they have raw A2 Jersey cow milk kefir, right? So they've got this stuff from the cow, they didn't touch it, and they fermented it right away. And so, like, the excitement I have giving this food to dogs, like, is a little nutty, but it's truly, it's like, here, have this supercharged food product. So you can get Answers Pet Food Kefir from, they have a store locator on the internet. You can't purchase directly, but there's a lot of, usually they are just like boutique pet stores that carry their product. And once they're approved to carry any of their products, they can order anything on the site. So if you go there and you see anything from Answers, but you don't see the cow milk kefir, you can say, hey, can I order 2 half gallons or whatever? And they'll order it, and then you can come pick it up from the store. But if you want to add something and really, truly add some really good bacteria, add the kefir. And the great thing is any kefir product, through the process of fermentation, all the lactose is taken out of the product. And some dogs are lactose intolerant. They'll have a reaction to cottage cheese and yogurt and stuff like that. So giving them kefir won't mess up their system because it's 99.9% lactose free for the most part. So that's great. And so green vegetables are a fantastic thing to add. There is a study out there that studied, it was limited in scope. It studied a particular breed of dog and a limited number of those dogs. I want to say it was Westies. But anyway, they added a specific amount of green leafy vegetables to the dog's regular diet. And this particular breed was very susceptible to getting stomach cancer. And just by adding the green leafy vegetables to that dog's diet over a period of time, decreased the dog's susceptibility or chances of getting that bladder cancer up to 90%. 90% just by adding some broccoli to the food, you know? And so for me, that's like a huge wake-up call that says, okay, I may not own whatever breed of dog was in that study. I may not own a dog that is susceptible to bladder cancer. But if adding something so simple can decrease cancer by that amount, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Note about adding veggies to the dog's diet. Vegetables are a carb, a healthy form of carbohydrates, but it's a carb nonetheless. And to break down carbohydrates, we need the amylase, which we talked about before, dogs do not have in their saliva. So we need to help the dog's body break this product down. And the way you do that is by lightly steaming. And so whatever vegetable you're using, put in a pot, a little bit of water, boil it for like 2 to 3 minutes. You'll see the color change slightly. That's when you're done. Plop it in a food processor. Once it's hot, we don't want to food process boiling products. And then that process of steaming really quickly plus food processing into little pieces breaks that food down enough so the dog can then access the vitamins and minerals. If you don't do that, you're simply adding fiber, and you'll see it come out the other end of the dog. Like if you just plop carrots in the kibble that are raw, it's going to come out the other side, and you'll be like, what the heck? You know, you got to help the dog break it down. Right, because they're a carnivore, and they don't know how to process raw vegetables. Whereas you give that to the goats, like, you know, I don't know goats, but I assume it's going to come out. You had no idea what they ate. It's going to come out like,
right. They look like little raisins, and they just go like, poop, and there's a whole bunch of poop, 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 and it looks like a bunch of raisins.
There we go. Perfect. Great. No wonder it's a delicacy for dogs. It's like little treats sitting on the ground. So other things you can add are pieces of meat. You can lightly cook it. You can put it in raw. Some people just have some ground beef, and each day they'll just put a little bit in the dog's food, and that's adding fresh unscathed for the most part, amino acids and just good protein for the dog. If you want to add fish, sardines are a great, easy way to get fish. You can get them off Amazon. And you just want to make sure there's no salt added and the fish is wild caught and in water. So those are my 3 requirements, and it is on the sheet that you're going to post. Mackerel, same thing. So you can get cans of mackerel. I do not like mackerel from China. Okay, so don't get mackerel from China. If you order from Amazon, a lot of their stuff does come from China, so don't get that. So look at the sourcing. You don't want Chinese fish because they'll probably be radioactive mackerel if you get them from China. So we don't want that. And then a quick, easy, relatively cheap thing is if you boil a whole bunch of eggs, you can drop an egg in the dog's food as frequently as you want. It's considered a whole food supplement, or a whole food thing that you can add to the food. It's not technically a supplement.
So here's a great egg story, because we do have chickens, and so we have our own eggs. When the chickens come out, I tell people that, my chickens poop me breakfast, and Rich is like, stop saying poop. They don't poop it. It doesn't come out that hole. It comes out a different hole. And I'm like, but pooping it out is funnier. So whenever they lay eggs, right, ours are all colored. So we have browns, and we have one that does white. We have blues and greens, and we have like a peachy pink, but we have all different colors and stuff. And sometimes like they'll be covered in poo, and sometimes they're like really fresh, like not covered in poo. Until you wash them, they can stay on the counter because there's a bloom that's on the egg, so it'll stay good and it'll stay. So we keep ours on the counter. I don't refrigerate my eggs. Now, when they have a whole bunch of poo on them, like we are refrigerating that on, or washing that off, and then it has to go in the fridge. Or those are usually the ones that Rich he'll boil them up. So he has boiled eggs for his food too. But the shells, because we don't like chlorine bleach them like what they do in the stores, the shells are totally edible. So it is a great way to add some extra calcium to your dog's diet. If you're, steaming up the vegetables and then food processing them, you can put the eggshell in there. I just will give it to the dogs. Gypsy loves eggs. There was like a year ago, there was an egg challenge, like see if you can get your dog to hold an egg.
I remember that.
So I'm like, okay, let's see if Gypsy can hold an egg. And I'm like, Gypsy, come here. And she ate it right away. She goes, that was good. Give me another.
Failed miserably.
But she wanted to keep trying.
Yes. Let me try that again, Mom. Wink, wink. Like, give me another one. Yeah.
So like when we're breaking them up, we have a basket. And sometimes while we're doing it, it'll like one of them will break and we'll see it break. So like those are always her eggs. So she loves it whenever that happens and she gets her own eggs.
I did not know that about eggs, like having the protective layer essentially. Like I had heard you didn't have to refrigerate eggs, but I was like, okay, but like the carton says refrigerate it, so I was confused. That totally makes sense. Like,
right?
You blew my mind. Like I learned something today. That's good.
Well, it's nice having the mini homestead that we have, with the critters and with the food and stuff, because, I talk to people who do raw, and I've done raw in the past, and I don't do raw currently because it takes entirely too much time. And I have 5 dogs. So I do kibble. But I do, like, they have veggie cubes. So they'll get veggie cubes. Like, well, I'm cutting up. Gypsy is always right there because she always gets some. I joke that when I finally get on Master Chef with Gordon Ramsay, like, she's going to have to be the dog to come with me, and she'll, like, help eat things. Yes. She'll be like, where is it? I saw you cutting something. I'd be like, I don't know. And Gypsy will be there with it hanging out of her.
Gone. Like, here. Yeah.
But what I found, too, with getting a whole cow back, like, there's parts of it that I am not sharing. Like, my steaks, like, I'll cut off the fat. I'll give you the bone with all the stuff inside of it. But I am not sharing my steak meat because I really like good steaks. So people who are like, well, I need to get like the 70-30 ground beef to feed to the dog. I'm like, that's not what they eat. Like they'll eat like the tips and tails. They'll eat the odds and ends. Like that's how they were. Like it was share the food. But people weren't eating McDonald's and, Burger King. They were eating like homemade food every day.
Right. Exactly. And you can go back and you can look at the history of kibble. And I want to say whenever cereal products themselves became popular for humans because the extruder machine was created, and all this machine is, it looks like an enormous cylinder with different shaped holes. Like each
Play-Doh.
machine. Yes, yeah, like the hairdresser Play-Doh, like when you put the Play-Doh in, you put the little person on and the hair grows, the barbershop Play-Doh. Absolutely remember playing with that. That's exactly what it is. And so these shapes of meat come out and then they're chopped, and that extruder machine is actually cooking it, and so like kibble just pops out. But the reason kibble has a higher carbohydrate content than non-kibble dog products is because we need the carbohydrates and the starches to bind that food together to actually create that brown ball, and in order for it to remain that shape. So I can't remember. I've looked this up so many times, but I want to say it was after World War II, because during World War II, all the steel and metal was being used for war purposes, and previous to that point, most dog food was canned. And so they had to come up with a different way to commercially feed dogs without it being in a can. And I think simultaneously, I could be like really messing up these facts, but simultaneously the extruder machine was coming out, and they were like, hey, hello, now we have dog food in bags, and look what we can do. And that was cheaper anyway. So
I heard it was because there was a bunch of like food shavings on the floor of like, I don't know, the cereal company. And they're like, what can we do with these shavings? I know, let's feed dogs. I love your man. So I'll go back and read some of his sometimes, and sometimes he posts, and he had just posted something about like biscuits that sailors would have, and whenever they dock, they're not going to eat their biscuits because they're gross, and so they toss them. And that was like the start of dog treats.
Yeah.
And all of that stuff. So I enjoy him.
Yeah.
I don't agree with everything, but I enjoy it.
Sure. Yeah. And that that would not surprise me if that's how dog kibble, like all of these ideas simultaneously came together, and somebody had a eureka moment, was like, I know. And I want to say it was one of the big companies that started the trend, like Purina. I want to say like they've been around for quite some time. So, but I want to say they're one of the first bagged dog foods that came out, but nobody hold me to that because I could be wrong. So, but that's all I have as far as supercharging the kibble. And I just see a few questions that I didn't answer. So somebody asked, why do you add the warm water? So adding water in general is beneficial because we're re-moisturizing, adding moisture back to the dog food. I recommend warm water because it hydrates faster, it's warmer, and when you think about, what were the predecessor to dogs used to eating, when they were eating live or recently killed creatures, and so the warmth of the material does appeal to the dogs.
Well, if it's hot water, you're going to have to wait for it to cool. If it's cold water, because like I like ice water. Like you go out to like Chinese restaurants and they're like, no, we don't give you ice water, we give you normal water. Because like, no. And I'm like, no, I want the ice water. Like I want cold water. I like cold water. I don't like warm water. Dogs aren't the same. So like when it's really hot with the service dogs, like I cannot give them ice water. I can give them cooler water. Like I'm not going to give them like 100-degree water because it's not hot. But it screws them up somehow inside to drink the cold water all the time.
Yeah, I didn't know that. It could be, I wonder if it has something to do with decreasing the temperature of the dog's body too quickly, which that can cause problems. So it might be that. But yeah, so the warm water also makes the food smell better. And so what I do is as I'm preparing all the bowls of food for whatever dogs are with me at that point in time, I just turn the tap water on hot. And as I'm dumping kibble and meat and whatever, by the time I'm finished sorting all of those bowls, the water is ready to use. And I just dump it in and I let it sit until like it looks mushy, and it's cooled off by then, at least to room temperature or not hot at that point. And dogs love it. Like I cannot tell you, like it's the cheapest trick in the book. There are a lot of people who say they have picky dogs and they say, well, did you add warm water and let it soak before serving? And they're like, no, but I've added bone broth, filet mignon, and peas. And I'm like, well, try the cheap route first. And then somebody asked about the kefir. Yes, kefir is an excellent thing to add. And then the last thing is I use tap water and let it soak for 25 minutes. Yep, perfect. That's a lot longer than I wait. I ain't got all that time. Like 5 minutes max, and the dogs need to be eating because I got, get my son to school or dogs, and I had 25 minutes. But that's awesome.
Well, here's another great thing you can do with that kibble mush, as I call it, is if you have one of the Kongs and you have like a puppy who's teething and like they need it, is you take that kibble mush and you stuff the Kong with it, and then you freeze it, and it's fantastic. It's like a popsicle.
That's a super good idea. I never thought of that. Super good. And you're not upping their caloric intake. So I do not like when dogs grow wider. I like nice, lean, athletic dogs. And so if anybody's listening and they missed that part, like when you add fresh food to the diet, you must take away some of the kibble they're eating. Like, we do not want dogs to grow fatter, because that's negating the benefits of adding fresh food. Lots of benefits to that. Having an obese dog, lots of negatives that go into that. So keep the dogs lean. That's, in my opinion, that's one of the number one ways you can prevent cancer, is keeping a lean dog.
Yeah, I like a lean dog, especially since we do so much with service dogs. The lean dog can work for you a lot more than a dog who's huffing and puffing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it saves their joints. And I can't quote the studies, but there are studies out there that essentially say, if Rodney quoted one of them, I think he said, whatever you're feeding your dog, the average American, if you would take out 25% of what you're currently feeding them, don't do anything with it. Just take out 25%. We could reduce cancer rates by like a staggering amount. And it's just because of the obesity problem we have in our animals. So,
well, and yourself, because people bring in the food, sometimes the first time we meet the dogs coming in for board and train, like that's the first time we're meeting them is at drop off, and they'll bring their food in, and, some of them will have a cup that's a cup. Some of them will have a cup that's, a Slurpee cup. And I'm like, that's not the same thing. Like a cup is a cup. Now, and then I was telling Rich this because he didn't know there's a difference between a measuring cup for dry foods and a measuring cup for liquids.
True.
So he has one of those Pyrex, you know what I'm talking about, the clear plastic ones with the handle. And he was using that. I'm like, that's not a 2 cup. I said, that's 2 cup liquid. I said, you need to have the scoop. That's 2 cup. That's, a 1 cup dry. And he's like, well, what do you mean? And so I had to explain to him that
it's different.
Like he didn't know that.
Yeah, bakers. If anybody's a baker, yeah, bakers, they would have like scolded him. Like they know the difference between the dry measuring cups and the wet measuring cups. And I like the dry measuring cups anyway because they fit in the bags. I'll just leave them in the bags so I know, this dog gets a third of a cup, and I get a bunch of them from Dollar Tree or whatever, because I just somehow all my measuring cups disappear. But the problem you mentioned about dogs coming to you on food that you might not have recommended, I totally changed the way I do my board and trains because of that problem, because the dog would come in on puppy chow or whatever, and I would internally die a little bit. Because here's this dog coming to me for behavioral training, but in my mind, I can't address that dog's mind until their body is somewhat fixed up. And what is the easiest way to fix up a body? Well, what are we putting in it? What are we fueling it with? And if that's with corn and red dye number 40, like, we're going to struggle during training. So instead of the dog coming to me first on that diet and then on the back end of training discussing nutrition, what I started doing is I have a diet consultation 30 to 60 days before training, totally separate, and that cost is built into the package price. They come to me or I come to them, just depending on the client. And it's about an hour-long discussion of this type of stuff. What are the basics? Dogs are carnivores. what do they need to eat? Like in a perfect world with all the money, what would they eat? And then based on their budget and time constraints, what sort of food would be best for them? And I'll give that recommendation. Then it's up to them to go purchase the stuff, transition the dog appropriately, give me feedback. If the dog is having explosive diarrhea, that's not, like, I don't want you to feed what I tell you on this paper and live with explosive diarrhea. Like, the number one rule with diet, and I guess I should have said this at the very, very beginning, is feed the dog in front of you. Okay, so if the textbook answer is not working for that dog, that's not an appropriate answer. So anyway, the client gets my recommendation, they transition their dog on their own, and then the dog comes to me having been on a new diet for potentially 30 days at that point. And I have had clients cancel their programs, which, you know, is fine with me. They did it appropriately and with enough advance notice. And they said, my puppy is not as crazy as I thought they were once we fixed their diet. And I said, that's a win. That's awesome. You know, I lost the client, but they got the puppy that they were hoping to get in the first place. And I said, perfect. Like, and that is the best reason I've ever heard for canceling a training program is fixing the diet, fix the problem. So that's how I've solved that problem is I just have the consultation beforehand. And then that way I'm not the one who has to deal with the transition, because the transition is, it's not as easy. You've got to do math when you're half asleep in the morning, like making dog food, because, you know, you slowly transition into the new stuff. So that's been working out brilliantly. And
so the business person in me is like, Lauren, we need to talk about getting you an online course, because that would be a perfect thing to send out to them. And then you can do like a 15-minute on the phone type of thing, or a 15-minute type of shorty.
Yeah, true. I mean, I'm open to ideas. There's a lot of people I would love to just give this information to without, you know, not attached to a training program. And again, disclaimer, I meant to say this at the very beginning and we talked about it multiple times, but here's where my sort of hold up is I am not a certified canine nutritionist. I'm not a vet. I don't have letters after my name that makes me technically qualified to give, legally qualified to give any of this information to people. So I want people to understand this is my opinion on the matter. And so, you know, talking about that, I can see there being a lot of legal hoopla that I might have to deal with, pushing out information like that without.
I think as long as you give the disclaimer, and I've seen a couple of like become a certified dog foodie. So that's what you look into, but then it's like, well, who gives the certification? And then part of it's like, well, who cares? I got it.
Yes. So there are some online courses that I've been taking throughout the years, and like full honesty, like I've never completed them because like I start getting them and like I get such good information that I just start like running with it. And I'm like, you know, I already got so much stuff and I just need to, time is always my limiting factor. Like I literally have a sticky note over here that's like, hey, finish that course, Lauren. Like you need to finish the course. And then at least, you know, I would have something and be like, hey, well, you know, I did, here's my piece of paper that says I'm like, I know this stuff. But that's kind of the holdup I have with that. But sure, I'd love to talk to you about it and see let's what your ideas are.
I love helping people to like work easier. And like this, I'm going to download this video and upload it onto Facebook. If the video turns out well, you know, it's going to go up in the podcast. And then this might end up in the online course as well, because it's great information for people.
Sure.
And, you know, like they're going to find it on YouTube. They're going to get that information out there. They're going to be able to come and find you and ask questions like, it's been a few weeks. Like, I know people change their food. Like, what else do you like? You like this food? We have had some dogs come out with their food. What we started doing this year is if I feed house food, I charge you. Because before I'm just like, whatever. And so this year I've noticed like everyone brings their own food out. And there's sometimes I'm like, I am not feeding that food. And here's why. This was when we were in Gainesville. So we're probably talking 5 to 10 years ago. We had one summer, we had like 3 or 4 puppies come in, 4 to 6 month old puppies, and they were all crazy. That duty crazy, right? All crazy. They were all on the new food that was out at the time, which was the Rachel Ray dry food. It had all these pretty colors in it, Lauren. You don't understand. It was very pretty, and it was Rachel Ray, and she's a chef.
Rachel Ray's on there. Yes.
We got, I mean, it wasn't just the training, but we got all the dogs off of it, and holy cow, what a difference. So now when I Rachel Ray, I'm like, ooh, no, stop. Like, I want to buy Gordon Ramsay dog food just because Gordon Ramsay's name was on it, because what do you know about dog food?
Yeah. Dog nutrition. I mean, I started this off by saying there's a lot of crossover, but like when it comes down to the daily nutritional requirements of a human versus a dog, totally different. So that point matters. But there's a lot of foods out there that I cringe. And I'm like, ooh, there's something better. But I sort of, in my brain, I categorize things like dogs should never eat this. Like, they will barely survive on this. Yeah. And then there's a bunch of foods, and down in there is Purina Puppy Chow and Beneful and the things that have dyes in it.
Oh, Roy.
Synthetic preservative. Oh, Roy. And then, I don't know if you even knew this, but like Dollar General sells dog food. And I looked at it one day, and like, I would really hate to know where that stuff came from. And it doesn't meet any daily nutritional requirements. And so there is no seal that says meets AFCO requirements or whatever. So there are those categories where like nobody should feed this food. I don't care what budget you're on. There's something we can find you that's better. Then there's a ton of kibble out there that I'm like, I'm wishy-washy. I'm like, well, it's not O'Roy, so that's good. But for this same price, or maybe $10 more, so give up 2 Starbucks and we can fix your dog, And then there's this category where like, I'm so picky about kibble because there are so many other options out there. And then there's a whole group in my brain. There's a category of foods that are good, like your dog will do just fine on, with a bunch of different price points. Whole Dog Journal every year publishes a probably 10-page list of dog foods that meet very basic requirements. So there's no artificial colors, flavors, or preservatives in them. And they have a few other requirements. I think no corn or soy-based ingredients. I had the whole list downloaded at one point. You do have to pay for the list, but if somebody is really searching for options, there's a whole list, and they meet some minimum threshold requirements. And for me, those are all of the dog foods that are in the middle. Like, I'm not crying, but I do think of that list, there's a lot we can eliminate based on ingredient content. So, that's out there for anybody. If anybody's looking for just a quick like eye chart visual, I like dogfoodadvisor.com. They're a great resource, unbiased. I think the only affiliation they have is with Chewy. Like, so when they talk about a food, they'll have a link and it'll pop up on Chewy. And so they do have a program, a beneficial program with them, but not with any particular brand itself. So they're a very unbiased look at dog food. And they sort of break down how many carbs, how much protein, how much fat, what are the quality of these ingredients in a very step-by-step manner. Super informative. They also have a list of all recalls. So whatever brand of dog food you're feeding, you can click on that and you can look up all the recalls to date and see what were they for and how many million bags of dog food were recalled and stuff like that. So that's a really good resource for people. That list I mentioned earlier called The List from The Truth About Pet Food, that is a nonprofit, and that is a huge way that they make money. And I do encourage people to support them because the amount of work they put behind the research they do is so impressive, and it's all for the benefit of the dog. Like, there's no other reason that they would be doing this. It's not for fame, because like they're constantly getting berated by certain dog companies for the research they do. But you have to donate some amount of money, at least $10 to get the list. You can donate whatever amount, but at least $10 to access the list, and then you get it in a pretty PDF. If anybody is interested in feeding cooked dog food, pre-made commercially cooked dog food, there's a lot that spams my Facebook now that are sponsored ads. Facebook knows me, like every ad is relating to dogs or diet in some way. But there's a lot of that, like the farmer's dog, Fresh Pet from Target. Those are all cooked, balanced, complete meals that look like food. And so that's becoming an extremely popular type of food to feed. But like any other type of food, there's extreme differences between the source of the ingredients, how much is this actually processed, what preservatives are in it, by what method are you actually getting delivered. And that list has a lot of cooked options on there. That's the list from Truth About Pet Food. So that was surprising, because that's a category of food I'm not as well versed in. And so it was nice to see right off the bat, okay, if somebody's interested in feeding this, because some people are put off by raw. They want to feed fresh, but they have kids and it just grosses them out. And that's fine. Like there's nothing wrong with being honest about things that yuck, the yuck factor, you know? So cooked food is a great alternative. It's still really fresh. It's lightly processed. And then you don't have to worry about the worries and concerns people have with raw feeding. So
as long as cooked food isn't a happy meal.
Yes, yeah. So there goes the quality. Yeah. And sometimes, you know, I truly feel, sometimes when I talk about Kibble, I feel like I'm directing people to different fast food restaurants. Like, okay, like, you know, McDonald's is our old Roy, and like Farmina is more like Chick-fil-A. You know, it's like, okay, we're still talking fast food and drive-through, but there's a significant difference between the sourcing and the processing. But at the end of the day, this is all still fast food. And so to put it in perspective, you know, it's still a processed form of food. And that's why if you want a primarily Chick-fil-A diet, there are still other things you need to do. Like maybe you can take the bun off and then order a side salad instead. And that's sort of like the analogy to this sheet is fine. Like eating Chick-fil-A is probably not going to harm you long term if you take proper precautions and make sure to add some greens and then substitute and make sure you're getting all this stuff. So that's my sad attempt at making this easy to understand for the average person.
Understand it.
Yeah. So, but that's everything I've got. I am happy for people. I told you before, like I'm not a techie person, really. I don't know how to navigate this stuff, and that's why I didn't touch it. Like as soon as it came up on my screen, I didn't want to touch the computer. But however you put it, if people are truly interested in my humble, relatively uncertified opinion on whatever they're feeding their dog, they can feel free and be like, hey, I'm feeding this. And if they give me a shot of the ingredients, I'll sort of give my opinion on it. That's perfectly fine if people want to know different brands that I like. There are some easy, convenient supplements beyond what I gave. Like if you want to feed vegetables, but you don't have the time to steam them and process them and then package them yourself, there are options out there, and I'm happy to talk to people about it, because at the end of the day, like we are truly in a crisis when it comes to dog health and human health as well. But the amount of dogs with allergies, cancer, autoimmune issues, obesity, infections, it is skyrocketing. There is no way around it. Diabetes, everything is on the rise. And it comes back to, we have now had so many generations of dogs eating things improperly, like eating things that are not biologically appropriate for them. Too many generations of dogs eating corn. And so for me as a trainer, it matters what people feed their dogs, because what you put in is what you get out. And so a dog that's eating well is going to be a dog that isn't quite as much of a pain as the same untrained dog would have been on something else, you know, not eating a good diet. So that's truly why it matters to me. And that's how this whole thing blossomed, is as a trainer, I'm trying to find the best way to train your dog for a lifelong impact. Like, truly, I don't care if your dog can do a down, so long as they're not a pain in the rear end and they're healthy and they're being a good pet. Like, that's what matters to me, is the mindset and the body. And that's how all this developed, is like, and because I have my own personal problems, you know, it's just become a fascination and a hobby. And I read like way too many bags of Kibble and their ingredients, like just too many. So it's something that interests me. So I find it fun and not a burden whatsoever when people ping me and they're like, hey, what do you think about this? And I'm like, cool, I'll totally give you my opinion. But if people just want a quick answer, this sheet is totally it. And I also have a sheet built for people who want to feed things other than kibble. And I'm always willing to talk about that, because I do have some of my favorites from all of the other categories. But like I said, the majority of people are going to stick with kibble. And so it was important for me to come up with a way that people could still do that, but do it better and for the benefit of the dog. So that's that. That's what I got.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And so, guys, Lauren is on Facebook. What's your Facebook name? Is it just Lauren Turner?
Yes, it's Lauren Turner, and
you don't have any middle name or maiden name?
Nope, I have a sunflower icon, and I remain somewhat incognito as far as that goes. I'm pretty sure that all of my settings are pretty stringent, so that like random people can't friend me, and so I'm not trying to be unfriendly. It's just, you know, I post pictures of my kid and stuff on there. But my other my business Facebook page is extremely open, so people can go on there and find that and ping me there and then find me through there. But Lauren Turner on Facebook with a sunflower icon or profile picture. My Facebook business page is Ideal Dog. I think if you just search for it, Ideal Dog Services is what will actually pull it up. And I do have an Instagram, but like there is no point in following that account, like zero point. I couldn't tell you that, like, again, I'm very not technologically motivated. So I find something that works and like that's what I do. And then of course my website, which has a contact thing. So people can reach me through all of those things, and I'd be happy to help.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lauren.
You're welcome.
In Florida and Lower Alabama. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and for giving your time to help share information about feeding to get the best out of your dog and turn your dog into the ideal dream dog that we know that they could be.
Oh, that was good. I see what you just said. That was great. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And then for all you guys, like, share, subscribe, listen. Podcast is How to Train Your Service Dog the NePoPo way. So we will catch you not next week, because next week I am in Missouri at Silver School. So Karen and I will probably do a live or two, but I'm not guaranteeing anything. So we'll be back in 2 weeks.